Hey everyone, we've had a look at Career Dispatch and the best champions, but when I was researching both of those, I found things that I think are underrated right now and are actually pretty good, but nobody plays them. I haven't seen them in ages. This video is going to be the top 10 of those that I found, but I'm actually kind of curious, so pause the video in a second and quickly leave a comment with 5 you think are going to be here. Let's see how many you get right. If you can dodge the comment that has the timestamps or the list, I guarantee you is going to be down there anyway. So first up, Volibear is the reason for this video, really. I've seen him a bunch more recently as a top laner and also as a jungler, and he's definitely top of both of those. He's actually had a fair amount of buffs recently. So in 9.2, Majestic Roar your E, the bonus damage was changed to maximum health damage. That's actually 8%, and that's if you interrupted a dash or a jump, and that is a lot of damage. His ultimate was also buffed as well to make it a little bit quicker to activate straight away, and then most recently we had the Frenzy buff, so the attack speed bonus per stack was increased. Those are going to play into top lane and also in the jungle, but Volibear as a champion is pretty easy to play. He does a pretty good damage actually as well. He's very tanky and has an amazing mid-game mix of damage and tank. In the jungle, he's best early to mid-game, really. Like, you have really good ganks as you charge in and you flip people. You win almost any 2v2 as well because of the healing from your passive. I know it sounds pretty obvious, but if you focus Volibear, you have to get through the additional healing as well from his passive. And honestly, like, he'll last too long and you will just lose that 2v2. You can also run Conqueror if you want to for a bit more damage, by the way. But after Shock means you can survive even longer, especially while you stack up your W. So it has some really good built-in synergy. When you're building Volley, you're going to have like a mix of tank and damage as well. It's not just him himself, so you'll have like a Dead Man's Plate and a Visage, for example, like really good with him, but also a Sterix to give you a big ass shield. Wit's End is really good with your ultimate. It's so underrated. You have really good synergy and amazing healing with the passive together because it kind of like activate at the same time. Next up, we are going to go to a top laner. Well, kind of anyway, but Rumble has roasted my ass a few times in solo queue recently, and I've realized just how strong he actually is. He does have a good win rate, and especially since he buffed it a while ago where they had the lower ultimate cooldown and double the move speed on his shield rank 1, which you're going to leave that rank 1 for a lot of the game. With those, he's definitely safer now. I think like he can run away a bit quicker. He can also chase people down as well, and he has a very strong lane phase, and this is something that a lot of people don't expect, but one of the big reasons why you would pick up Rumble. It definitely helps that nobody really knows how your overheating system kind of truly works, so they'll take really bad trades just because you know what you're doing, and they have zero idea. Rumble is kind of notorious for like having really high base damage in his kit anyway, which is why you just build a Lotus spell pen. Like, your ultimate does 700 damage and 175% of your AP. Obviously, people aren't going to really stand on every part of that, but even just half of it would be a lot of damage, and that is huge. Rumble can also work mid lane, by the way. He's basically a mage anyway, right? AP damage and huge impact in these early fights, which you are going to have a lot of in the current meta. If we swing onto the other side of the map, AD carry is a very like small role compared to everything else, right? So it's hard to have a proper underrated pick, but Zyra is the closest you're really going to get. So she's also had some buffs recently, twice during season 9, longer root duration on her E, and more recently, more attack speed on her W. Now her W is one of the most underrated skills in the entire game in my opinion. This is where she attacks really fast, gets like 70% attack speed, 30% move speed, and strikes for another 20% damage. That is kind of what makes her one of the most underrated AD carries entering into late game. Like, you genuinely need to be quite afraid of her when she presses her W. Like, just wait for it to time out. It is 4 seconds. It is a long time. If she bashes you a few times within that, you're definitely going to feel the pain. The good thing is, though, that your damage is better than people think in the lane phase as well. So you can kind of accelerate into that late game a little bit easier. Like, your root does a lot of burst damage and you're insanely safe with your ultimate. If you do get ahead, it's really hard to shut down a Zyra because you dive onto her, she'll ult, she'll root you, and she'll just shred you with that W. Moving into our mid lane properly, Zilean is legitimately the definition of underrated for mid and support actually as well. Like, he is the first champion I think of when someone says who is underrated. He has always got one of the highest win rates in the entire game out of any role, and one of the lowest play rates as well. On Riot's kind of like OP grafting we looked at before, he is right at the top. At a very simple level, he's just very hard to play against, and this is why he can be so good. You play League for like 1,000 games, right? And you'll get next to no experience dealing with a revive like Zilean has. So that means you have to learn and you have to adapt as you play that individual game, right? But the Zilean player already knows exactly what he's going to do. That is just a huge advantage for the Zilean and a huge disadvantage for everybody playing against him, and especially at lower ranks as well. People just have no idea. He's always going to be able to bait people. Like, you'll make the enemy team take bad fights, have to kill like like a tank twice or a carry twice, and it just buys you time. Time is something that we don't really think about in League, but if you have to kill somebody and wait like an extra 10 seconds or something, that is a long time for the rest of the team to kind of collapse on top of you. It's not just that though, because his damage is actually kind of nutty. Like double bomb is a game-changing stun if it hits across an entire team. There is so much more to him, like slows so you can't dodge a stun, your speed to kite people, like engage and you can catch people. I've even seen a Korean Zilean put ultimate on somebody as they TP'd into the middle of a fight in another lane just to make sure they couldn't die instantly. Like there is a lot of next level stuff that you can do with Zilean. Next up is one of my favorite champions. I love me some Zyra. He's a really good support choice though when you want to hard carry games yourself. One of the downsides though is that he doesn't bring much except a ton of damage, but he's very hard to play against. Luckily though, he does bring enough damage to kind of make up for it. Doran Shield isn't going to be as good nowadays, and if they don't have a heal support, they're going to cry for ganks all game because there isn't really much they can do. They have to hard engage on you before you poke, but like that requires some coordination with the AD carrying the support, which is never there in solo queue. He will legit do more damage than your AD in the lane phase, but you can't really help that AD much if they get caught out like a Morgana could or something, so it is very like one-dimensional. He's amazing with stuff like a Sivir or an Ezreal who are already very safe themselves, so they don't really need you to protect them. But he's also a very good counter to other damage champions like a Zyra or Bram because he has more range and just about as much damage as well. Moving into one of the most underrated champions in the entire game, especially at lower ranks, we're going to look at Yorick. He's a monster at like gold and below, for sure the most underrated top laner if you're climbing 2 diamond for the first time. Earlier in the season, his goals were made a bit better with a few buffs, and his ultimate also scales way better, gets tankier, and can follow him when he enters a fight. So the big thing about Yorick is that he punishes mistakes insanely hard. Like if you're going to walk up too far, then he's going to cage you and smash your face in. If you don't want to recall and you want to farm under your tower like you can against a lot of champions, well, tough. Like he's going to poke you and send his ultimate to kill you instead. If you do take a bad trade and you do have to recall and you base it at a bad time, then he'll smash your tower with his ultimate and Sheen, collect all the plate gold and nuke your tower. The funny thing is as well though, he can genuinely win a lot of games without having to team fight properly or ever leaving top lane, and that's pretty ridiculous, but it's also very hard to play against. Kind of like the Zilean example, you don't have much experience with that because not many other champions can do it, so whenever there's a Yorick in the game and he starts to do that, you kind of panic. If he does teamfight, his damage is really good, but he also heals for an absolute ton, and Death Dance is definitely a very underrated pickup for him. It gives you more choice for how you need to win. That's basically the big thing. NiKo isn't exactly like purely underrated as a champion. Starting to get played a little bit more popular again, but it's mostly around her AP build and not AD anymore. The AD side of things was nerfed because it was ridiculous, but then slightly buffed again, and basically NiKo early into the game is a hybrid of both, and that is why it's so good. That is what makes her one of the best in the lane phase bot lane and shred through any other AD carry where they just can't really compete. There's two sides of it. Like the first side is that she has consistent damage with press attack in her third hit, right? So her auto attacks basically she can just spam them out and do a lot of damage over time. She also has a crazy long route though with her E, a poke from her Q and eventually lockdown from her ultimate, which kind of like adds into that ability damage. Basically, if she does get any sort of lead in the game, she'll run away with it, like just as much as a Draven can actually. She'll fire out the root, lock you down, and you'll be dead before it's done, and she can do basically that all by herself. Especially if you run a build like Blade into Rage Bait into Wit's End, your mid-game single target damage is something like a Cogmore, plus you can protect yourself more and kite amazingly well. So another champion that has been heavily affected by nerfs, if you remember, just before Season 9, Thalia was gutted in the jungle, and ever since then, we've barely ever seen her. She's actually a very solid mid and support pickup right now, and there are two things about those changes at the time that really stand out. So the word ground duration was massively lowered, and the cooldown of her Q was also lowered quite a lot for laning. That's actually a good buff for her mid lane. That means she can poke and push much harder than before, force the enemy mid laner under tower, and then freeze her up to roam around the map. Part of the reason Jungle Thalia even started in the first place was because her ganks are pretty solid. She has that move speed near walls, and the ultimate is amazing for it. A lot of your damage is going to revolve around your flip, so if you land that, it's very close to a one-shot with Electrocute, and honestly, it's not even that hard to land once you get to grips with it. She ranks in about the top 10 for damage done on average in a game out of every single mid laner. If you build her full damage and just play for the poke and the flips, you can do some serious burst. So Fiddlesticks got a little buff recently with the crab now spawning later, right? It means he doesn't have to coin flip the game or risk getting smashed at least as hard early. Fiddles early has never been that good, but once he has his ultimate, it all changes, and if you don't have decent vision on the enemy team, then you'll end up getting hard punished. Teams just do not respect it most of the time. In Diamond, whenever I'm against a Fiddlesticks, I have to spam ping back all the time because we can't see him and you can't fight. He could be literally anywhere, right? He's on the side probably over a wall waiting to ult over and completely screw you. you. Once he does jump in, the fear is a point and click. It's 2.25 seconds. The silence is 1.25 as well. So if you layer that properly, it is 3.5 seconds where they can't really do anything. That makes him one of the best teamfight junglers out there right now. I've honestly won and lost games just from a really good fiddle ultimate, especially past 3 items. Even though he's not the best early game, he does tend to do pretty well against other carry junglers since they want to get ahead early, and sometimes they just can't get ahead enough. If you have a good early game, you're normally going to be a bit weaker in teamfights, and that is where fiddle really shines, right? And the fear will really mess them up as they dive in as well, especially something like a Rek'Sai. So Zyra is last up as another support. Underrated in my book because I never ever see her, but she's so dangerous to play against, and I actually love playing with them. If you get hit by a root in lane, you've easily lost like half of your health bar, and after level 6, you probably lost your entire health bar. Fun fact as well, Zyra averages more damage dealt per game than a Vayne or a Kai'Sa, and only slightly less than something like a Jinx. Obviously, it is a bit different because Zyra is poke and Vayne and Kai'Sa are a bit more all-in, but her plants will add a lot of damage to that, and even the burn from Liandry's will over time. Zyra also isn't played or banned very often at the moment, so she is kind of ideal to pick up and use a decent amount that you can actually do to make her better, like ulting with more plants and stuff, like using plants to block skill shots. People will often as well use her ult aggressively, but a lot of the time it's better to kind of counter and to split your team. As an example, if somebody like dives in to try and like dive onto your AD carry, you put the ultimate just behind them, it kind of zones the rest of the team, and you focus that one guy. It's a huge advantage. It actually does a lot of damage, a lot of burst, especially if you combo it with your root and some plants, but it's also there just to kind of zone as well. So those are going to be my top 10 underrated champions in Season 9. For now, let me know if you have any others you think deserve a spot. Obviously, there could have been a lot. Like Diana, for example, is a really good champion right now that probably is a little bit underrated. I should be streaming right now as well. If you fancy watching, I'll throw a link down below. But thank you for watching until the very end. And for now, I will leave you with the robots.